Hey YouTube, what's going on? It's Adam here with Retro Repairs, and it's time for another repair video. So what I've got here is a copy of Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and this is the cartridge that I got in a package with two carts, one of them being Super Mario RPG, which I fixed in my last video. But this one's a little bit nastier, so I'm going to open her up, show you what I mean. So I got this, it didn't have any screws on it, but all the components mostly were there. Doesn't have that black spacer either, so I can harvest that out of something else. But this is what we got here. So taking off the shielding, you can see there's already a bit of corrosion, but doesn't really get too bad until you flip that over. And this is telling me that most likely a battery exploded in this thing. So you can see clearly we've got a new battery. It's got some writing on there. This is not a genuine battery, so this probably came from China. It's going to work. It's going to do the trick, but someone did go in here and try and swap that battery. This never got cleaned up, which, I mean, it's not a huge deal because it's just affecting the shielding, but I'd like to replace that anyways, get some new shielding. This might be cleanable. Might try and do a little vinegar treatment to it, but for this purpose, I'm just going to swap it with another shielding. But once we actually look at the board is where it gets a little bit interesting. So I'm going to point out a couple of things. Firstly, you see there's a little bit of solder here. So someone was doing some solder and either dropped solder on these pins or tried soldering them for something. I'm not sure what exactly. My guess is it just dropped on it and they didn't have any solder wick to wick it up. So we're going to clean that up. The soldering joints here on the battery are not very good, so we're going to tidy that up as well. Overall, this board just needs to be cleaned, especially this side. You see some residue of something on here, so we need to clean that up. We look in, this is the ROM chip. Underneath here we can see that there is a little bit of corrosion, so it's possible that we've got some bad traces or bad legs on this chip. It's confirmed that we got some bad legs on this chip, and this is your RAM chip or your SRAM. Right there where my fingertip is, you can see that that one's almost completely eaten away. And again, right there and right there. So a couple of these legs are almost gone. I'd be surprised if they even get a connection. So this is going to have to be replaced. So this chip here, LH52V246AD, this is a proprietary chip made by Sharp for Nintendo. You cannot order these chips. The only way to get them is to harvest them off of other cartridges. So the other challenge is most N64 cartridges don't use this type of memory. They don't use a battery anymore. They have it all integrated often into the ROM chip, but sometimes it'll be a separate chip as well, but a different type of memory which doesn't require a battery. So you can't just open any old cartridge to get it. I've looked in some other ones, such as like an old Madden or an old baseball game, and they don't have this. So there are a few that are somewhat inexpensive that you can harvest chips off of. Some of them, such as Super Smash Brothers, use this type of chip, but that's not a cheap game. What I do have, however, is WrestleMania 2000, and this is not in great shape either. The label's all chewed up. Someone wrote on the back of it. So I'm willing to use this as a donor cartridge because I need to get a couple components out of it. Not only do I need this memory chip, but I also need this capacitor here, C4. Important to note that this is not a resistor. It looks like a resistor, but it isn't. This is a ceramic axial capacitor. I haven't found a good source for this type. You could put a radial one in, which is kind of like this. This is a radial capacitor with the two legs coming out the same side. This is an electrolytic capacitor, so it's not going to be suitable for this purpose. You do want to get a ceramic one, but just to give you an idea, you can put it in like that and bend it over, but if you can find the like-to-like version, that would be ideal. So let's put this to the side, and let's open up WrestleMania 2000. So we've got the two screws on the back. And then we've got the two Phillips screws on the inside holding the shielding down. So I'm probably going to just use this shielding. The shielding is in much better shape than the shielding that came in that Zelda cartridge. So we'll just take this. So this is what a genuine battery will look like. This one is Max L, but they don't have those yellow bands around them. This would have been something that was installed in the factory. As you can see, this chip's in much better condition. This capacitor is not broken. So I'm going to take the capacitor off of this, and I'm going to take this memory chip off. The easier way probably would be just to do a ROM swap. Take this ROM, put it here, take this one, put it there. Because this is a better board, I'd rather use this for better games. So I don't know, do I want to do that, or do I want to swap components back and forth? I think I'm just going to swap the components. So just to confirm, memory chips are the same. This I think is a serial number or a date code, so yeah, probably serial numbers, so it's not really important. The ROM chips are a different ROM chip, of course, so and this is a different CIC chip as well. So swapping the board might not work properly because these lockout chips are important. If they don't match the ROM, you may have issues. So yeah, I don't think we necessarily can swap the board without also swapping the lockout chip as well. So let's just start with this chip and this capacitor first. So let's get my desoldering gun ready to go and get some parts coming off here. All right, so first thing I want to do is just add some new solder to these points that I want to desolder. So this is the Zelda cartridge, the one that's in rough shape. So I'm going to top up the solder on these two rows and the 2 points up here for that capacitor. All right, so let's realign here. So I'm going to use this knife-shaped tip. So this is helpful for doing what's called drag soldering. So basically, just going to heat them up, add some solder to it, and you can run along slowly without applying a lot of pressure. And it quickly reflows these contacts. You just keep feeding a little bit of solder into it, and it does a good job of heating it up, flowing that solder. It's not really important that it looks great because these are coming off. The idea being that we just want to introduce some fresh solder here so that it's actually going to be easier to desolder. And then up here, 1 and 2. Cool. So now, next step, I've got my desoldering gun all heated up, ready to go. So just going to get a nice position here and start desoldering. Getting any suction. I'm gonna have to clink. I gotta clean my tip here. All right, so hopefully it's a little cleaner. Let's try that again. So heat it up, wiggle. There we go. That works much better. Alright, so that chip literally fell right out. So I want to point out, while I was doing that, as soon as I put the slightest amount of pressure on here, that leg came right off. So this chip, I want to say, actually, it's not a complete write-off. It may be salvageable still. Sometimes you can actually use a file and grind back a little bit of the plastic here so that you can access the metal underneath. See, this one's going to go right away too. Anyways, so you can access the metal underneath, and you can solder a wire to it or something like that. So this may be salvageable. I might try and do that for that that WrestleMania cartridge, but for now, that's just going to go off to the side. Next is this capacitor here, so I gotta remove that guy. And there we go. So that came out pretty easily. I'm just going to do a once over on these other chips. Just want to see, I think I could probably clean underneath this without desoldering this ROM chip. So for now anyways, I'm going to leave everything else here. So let's turn that desoldering gun off and give this a clean. Actually, before we clean it, I want to try and get this battery out. That was easy enough, so that came out nice and easily too. I didn't really need to take the battery out, but just being able to get under there and clean it a little bit easier is always good, considering how easily it comes out with that desoldering gun. So what I do for cleaning the actual board itself is I put some isopropyl alcohol just in a spray bottle here. Makes it easier to spray down the whole board. You can get a thin layer of alcohol over the whole thing and just scrub it with a toothbrush. Go to town. All right, so just gonna tidy this area up a bit, get that extra alcohol up, and then can dab the leftover alcohol off the board. It will usually air dry pretty quickly as well. There we go. So what I would like to do first is just confirm the actual capacitance of this capacitor. So not all multimeters will have a capacitor measuring setting, so you're gonna have to check your guide and see if yours has it or not. This particular one does, so just give it a second here. See if I can get in here to actually get a reading. You have to remove the capacitor from the circuit though in order to get an accurate reading. Otherwise, it's gonna pick up any other capacitors that are in there as well. Well, so I'm getting 76 nanofarads. So when I had read these color bands, the calculator told me it should be 990. So that's clearly not the case. Possibly this is damaged, or possibly I misread one of these bands. Maybe one of these whites is actually yellow. Oh yeah, that looks much more yellow on camera than it does in real life. So I'm guessing I put it into the calculator wrong, but let's desolder some parts from that other board. We can test the capacitor from that one as well, just to make sure that, see if we're getting the same reading or not. Holding them up side by side. Let's just see if the bands are even the same. That would be important. And it appears so. It looks like it's the same part. So let's do that same process with this guy here. So get my soldering iron, and I'm just going to reflow these joints. All right, so that is ready to go. Get that desoldering iron ready. All right, so let's try and get a nice close view of this. Oh, I got a bridge, just be easier to fix that now. There we go. Let's get a nice close view, just kind of show you what this looks like. So I'm going to start with this capacitor. And that's a nice clean solder hole. Okay, so that should just come right out, and it does. So let's do a capacitance measurement on that. So we're getting 115. So again, different from the 76 and definitely different from the 990. So that's interesting. I'm gonna probably verify those color bands once again just to make sure, but I mean, this is clearly the same part as the one I pulled off, so I'm not worried about compatibility there. Anyways, let's get back to removing chips. I'm gonna do a couple of these close up, and then I'll speed through the rest of them. So you can see that that whole chip starts moving now. That's nice and loose. And once again, literally fell out. So if you don't have a desoldering gun like that, you can still do this. You can use a desoldering braid. It is just a lot more of a pain to play with the braid and get it just right, but it is definitely doable. I have done it on some different chips before. You just gotta be patient is the biggest thing. All right, so let's prep this for soldering. So let's see here. What I like to do first, well, first thing, let's take a look at the board. So the board has this little notch in it here. You see the line, notch going in a line, and there's a smaller one right there. The notch indicates the orientation of the chip. So you see how this has a little cutout right there? Some chips don't have that. Instead, they have a little dot. And that dot is going to go on the bottom left. So if the notch is on the left, the dot should be on the bottom left. If the notch were on the right here, the dot would be on the top right. So that's just to make sure that you're orienting the chip properly. So let's take that out. Let's get these pads prepared. So once again, using isopropyl alcohol, 99% is best stuff you can get. If you can't get 99%, I know some states apparently just don't sell it. You can use 91. I mean, you could use 70. You just gotta really clean it good. because 70 is clearly going to have more water content in it than the alcohol, so you want to make sure that you're allowing for it to dry properly. So let's clean this up, get these pads nice and clean. Then I'm going to apply some flux. So I like to use rosin flux pen. You can use, there are other ways of applying flux, but I just find the pen to be simple, convenient, easy. All right, so chip in place, making sure that, again, you've got the correct pin alignment. I just want to do a quick once over here. It's easier to fix issues now than it is to desolder the chip and try it again, but I don't see any problems with those traces. So let's throw that in there. So what I like to do is, for the first couple pins, oops, I'm just gonna load up some solder on my soldering iron. So for each corner actually, just gonna tack it into place. One on each corner here, and that's just gonna hold it so that I don't have to. Now I can put this down and I can focus on soldering the rest of them properly. So I just wanna get this so that you can see. There we go. Get rid of some of that glare. Perfect. So clean off the tip a bit. And then same thing. We're going to drag solder this. I'm just going to work slowly and smoothly, ensuring that there's some nice solder applied to each of these. So take a look, make sure that you don't see any solder bridging. I don't see any. The glare's not the greatest, so I'm gonna have to go back and double check, but that looks okay to me. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's do a little bit closer inspection. Yeah, so you see that? Got some nice solder joints. One of them here I think might have a little too much solder, but that's not the end of the world. So those are good. So let's, while we're at it, let's get that capacitor prepped. So for these, it's helpful to have tweezers or needle nose pliers or something so that you can straighten these legs a bit and then hold it into place. When you're taking them off another board, putting it on a different board, it can be a little bit tricky because these legs are already shortened. So normally it's really easy to put it in and bend the legs how you like. So that's in. There's not a lot of room to work with, so what you can do, take the leg and kind of bend it outwards a bit. Same thing for the other leg, and that's just going to hold it into place. So now we're going to do the exact same thing. Just come at it with some solder. Let's clean that tip. Heat up the pad and the leg, introduce some solder, and just like that, perfect. So now we're pretty much done, I think, I hope. What we need to do still is clean this up, so use some isopropyl alcohol, just give it a good scrub. You don't have to worry about breaking anything when you do this. If you do happen to knock a solder joint loose because of your toothbrush, that means your solder joint wasn't very good. So if you've done a proper soldering job, you don't have to worry about anything here. All right, so that is the end result. Looks pretty good. I just want to tidy up these pins a little bit. So let's get, for this what I want to use is desoldering braid. So this stuff is Super Wick, made by MG Chemicals, and I find it works pretty well. I've used some cheap braids before, and honestly, they suck. They're a pain in the ass. They don't work very well. Just if you're gonna start desoldering, buy yourself a quality desoldering braid. It just works. It's so much easier. So I'm gonna use my other iron for this, just because it's a smaller tip. Doesn't hold as much solder. So all we're gonna do here, let's get a good centered view. Just gonna lay the soldering braid over top of where this excess solder is, heat it up, move it around. You're not applying pressure, you're not dragging, you're not like pushing into it, you're just moving it with your soldering iron. And there we go. So this will never be gold again because there has been solder dropped on it, but we've gotten as much of it up as we can. It's not going to have a big bulge anymore. So that should work just fine. Flip it over and we're going to do the same thing again here. So heat it up, suck into the braid. All right, so this one, it looks like part of that may be missing, but let's give that a bit of a clean. Let's use a Q-tip. All right, so one last thing before we finally test this. I just want to give those contacts a good solid cleaning. So what I like to use first is just a pencil eraser. This does a good job of grabbing any grime, dust, dirt, oxidation, anything off these pins, and gets it off. Bit once again with a Q-tip and some alcohol just to get any leftover eraser grime and stuff off here, but otherwise I think we're ready to test this and see if that was all this took or if there might be some bad traces somewhere. Typical culprits for bad traces are right along here. This is where that plastic spacer part goes, and that's probably, I'm going to say 90% of the N64 cartridges I've had to fix had that issue. So let's tidy this up. Oh, battery. Almost forgot the battery. So let's put this battery back in. Very important part is to note the polarity. So positives on the top, which is this leg. If we flip it over, so we see the positive will go into this large one. Usually there's a marking, but I don't see it. Maybe this board doesn't have a marking on it, so I guess not. So positive, top. The other way to tell if there is no marking on your board is the negative always connects to ground, and this is the negative terminal, and it connects to ground right here. This is ground pin, this is a ground pin, these two are ground pins. The positive is a 3-volt supply, which goes into this resistor, which goes a number of ways, but ultimately feeds the memory chip here. So just a quick little way for you to remember that. Let's clean these pads a touch. Now, sometimes you might have issue getting solder on these pads, and the reason for that is this negative's connected basically to a big ground plane, so it's like a big heat sink. So sometimes that can be, if your iron's not hot enough, it might have difficulty melting the solder because all of that temperature just gets wicked away. So let's try heat this up. That worked pretty well, I'd say. So I'm just going to tack this into place right now, and then we're going to actually make a proper joint. There's that one, and then come back and fix this. All right, that should work. Yep, that looks pretty good. All right, so let's throw this in a shell and just see if this happened to fix the problem. So I'm going to use the nicer shielding from the WrestleMania. Sorry, WrestleMania, nothing personal, but just like Zelda a little bit better. Still want to give this a little bit of a cleanup here, so try and get some of that those rust stains out, but for now, just want to see if this works. That's what I'm concerned about. All right, to the N64. All right, so moment of truth, we've got Legend of Zelda here. Let's see if that was all that it took. It appears not. So when I turn it on, I did get a little flash, but which is interesting. So we're gonna have to do a little probing on this board. Okay, so what I want to do here is test the continuity along these traces and into the top of these chips here. So to do that, you need a multimeter and you need a continuity mode, which will usually have a little audio speaker sound like right there with it. So all you're going to do, whenever you complete a circuit, you're going to get a beep like that. So just going from pin to where it goes, just to make sure that we're getting continuity. So I'm going to continue along with this and just see if all of these pins lead where we believe they're supposed to go. All right, so I may have found a potential issue here. So following this trace right here, this is pin number 37. Just going along this chip here. Oh, there it is. I wonder why I wasn't getting it before. There it is. Stand corrected. So 35, there we go. So I'm not getting anything from pin number 33, which is another issue. So just to cheat a little bit, let's use the other board here and see where pin number 33 is supposed to go. Supposed to go right there, so that is, oops, sorry, we're right here, right there. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So pin number 33. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Interesting. Oh, that's the wrong pin. 33 right here. 5, 6. So I'm not getting anything. So let's try, just run it along the back. Nothing. So I'm going to show you what I'm seeing here. Hopefully you can see this too. So I'm looking along the trace, and right along here, it kind of looks like that trace is worn away a little bit. So I want to scrape back a bit, get to the copper underneath. And then let's try that same test. So going from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That works. So from there to here does not work. So I've got a break in continuity as well. So we need to jump this trace. So let's get, I've done a bunch of these already. And like I said earlier, this seems to be the common culprit on these N64 carts, is right along where that black plastic spacer goes. So that's really quite the break. You can see it. Let's clean it first. You can see it better once you have a little bit of glare off that copper. You can really see where that break is. So take a look at that. That's like, I don't know, 1/4 centimeter. Big anyways, so let's try and fix that right now. So we're going to flux this. Going to get a piece of wire. So this is the wire I'm going to use. I believe it is 28 gauge stranded. So each of these strands is very, very small. So I'm going to grab 2 of these strands, hold them together, and just twist it just so that I get something to work with. All right, just like so. And use my cutters to cut the tip off so that I have a nice consistent end here. And then we're going to add some flux to this. So the flux is very important with this repair, because without the flux, you're going to have a hard time getting solder to actually stick to the trace and stick to this wire. So we're going to tin this wire first. Tinning it is basically just putting some solder on the wire. And that's going to help it to bond to the trace. We're going to do the same thing now to the trace itself. Now, all we're going to do, lay that in place. It's tricky working around this capacitor, but it's definitely doable. Apologize if that was off screen a bit. Yeah. All right, we're going to try that again. Reflux. All the flux has been spent. Reflux that. Okay, so that should work. So we want to do a continuity test first to make sure that we're getting continuity where it needs to go. So from here to pin 6, I believe. Good. I want to make sure we're not shorting it through this capacitor. We are, oops. There, we are not shorting it. We're getting it there. Nowhere else is getting a reading. Make sure it's not shorting to the pin next to it. We're good. So let's trim that. give it a clean. So again, alcohol, toothbrush. Pretty simple. All right, so one thing you could go back and do is, actually cover that up with, there's a couple things you could use. You could use basic nail polish if you wanted. They make a special type of, I don't know exactly what it's made of, but it's meant for solder masks, so you can use it to cover that up, just so that it's not going to be exposed to the oxygen, and it's not going to be a point of failure again. So let's just continue along with the tests here to finish the bottom row, and then we're going to test it out. Where's that go? There we go. So this one's not getting anything on the, oh, there it is. Okay. So that was 3. I thought that was, oh, that was 4. Perfect. 3, 2, 1, ground. All right, cool. Let's try that again. We're gonna test it, see if that works. All right, so moment of truth after doing those chip swaps, and then, oops, sorry. All right, so moment of truth after swapping the chips and then repairing that trace. Will it work? And it will. So we still need to test that it's actually going to save. That's going to be the big trick here. So I'm going to play ahead a little bit and see what happens. Okay, so I've started a game. I haven't gone anywhere yet, but I've entered my name. It should save that. So I want to test first just resetting it, if that's going to continue to exist. So I'll give it a second here to load up. Press start. Hopefully, there's my save game. Perfect. So now, a little bit better test. We're actually going to remove it from its power source altogether. Throw her in. Turn her on. It should work as long as it seems like it's committing to memory, so that tells me that the SRAM chip replacement worked fine. Usually if taking it out didn't work, then it's a battery issue. Looks like we're good. So, that's going to be it for this video. I still have to clean up that shell a little bit, but this is more to demonstrate how to actually swap some of these chips should you have the tools to do so, but get a cart that looks like this, trying to repair some severely liquid damaged and corroded cartridges. So thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Kona came to see what's happening here. Hi, Kona. Say bye. Okay, Kona says bye. She just doesn't really look like it. But yeah, so that's it. Thanks a lot for watching. Be sure to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of the video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave a like below as well. And until next time, thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next video.